Hi everyone, in today's video we'll be talking about a very interesting topic, which is...
Well, we are comparing three cameras, the Leica Q3 versus a 28 Summilux M on an M11.
Yep.
And then we will also have the 28 Summilux M on an M7 with Kodak Gold.
Yep.
So we'll be interested to see what the images are like.
Yeah, so I think the reason why we're doing this test as well with the M11 especially is because, you know, the sensor is supposed to be the same with the Q3, right? So we're trying to basically just look at the difference with the baseline of the sensor. So with that, let's dive into screen capture. So this is actually our Lightroom. On the left hand side, for the purpose of this video, is going to be always Q3. On the right side is going to be M11.
With the Summilux first.
So,
but before we dive in, stay tuned till the end because we have a gold nugget right at the end for you.
Especially if you're interested in a Q3. So.
Q3. We have two here.
So stay tuned.
All
right. So do you want to start? So on the left side we have the Q3. On the left hand side, the M11. So what jumps out to you straight away?
Well, the first thing you could see is how different the M11 colors are. I mean, we all know the M11 has a bit of a magenta tone, and we standardized both the camera profiles to Adobe Color. So this is what you see when you pull into Lightroom if you use the Adobe Color profile instead of the M11 profile. So the first thing we need to do is to adjust the magenta to 0, which we have done in Lightroom. And now you could see that at least the magenta is gone. But I think the M11 still looks darker per usual, doesn't it?
Yeah, I think the contrast is quite noticeable on the M11. I would say, like, I think you previously mentioned like the clouds, for example, when we were looking at these pictures before. The clouds is very dramatic.
Maybe we can try to adjust the exposure of the M11 up. Like if you look at the sky, the clouds, and just standardize both are equally bright. I think that's probably more similar. And but you could still see how, you know, M11 is, you know, really dark when it is dark. I think there's also vignetting component as well.
I would say the side of it is, you can tell there's some darkness creeping in. So it looks like a vignetting aspect to it. But I think another thing is, as we zoom in, let's try to make it.
And for your information for the viewers, on the Q3 you shot it at 1.7. ISO 200, and then for the M11 we shot it at also 1.7 and ISO 200. So on the settings on both cameras it's similar, and we focus both at infinity, right? So what you are showing now is a zoomed in picture of those two, and I mean it's really interesting to see the difference.
I think it's very clear in terms of the difference between the Q3 Summilux with the M11 compared to the M11. It seems the sharpness at infinity is not as sharp as the Q3 straight away. I would say even the buildings below, right? I mean, this obviously this structure here is very obvious, but even the buildings below, it's very clear that there's some loss of definition or sharpness here.
How many % are we zooming in at the moment?
That's a good question.
200.
200, So at 200, I mean, again, both are actually shot at their full resolution. So
60 megapixels on both sensors.
Exactly. So this is an interesting finding, at least from our perspective. Comparing the Q3 and
so Q3 is way sharper when you focus at infinity when you compare to the 28 Summilux M on the M11.
I think that's very clear.
So I think this is a nice demonstration that both lenses are also different in how they render image. Despite the sensors both 60 megapixels. Obviously, I think Q3, the lens utilizes the megapixels way better than the Summilux M on the M11. If you look at the 200% crop.
I do think that looking at just these two pictures, it's clear that for Q3 they did probably modify the lens to cater to the Q3 in a way that the M11 it is not fully utilizing that from my perspective. Right? So it's good to see. I mean, that there's a difference.
It's also interesting because when we started off, the M11 colors were more magenta-like.
Yeah.
That probably tells me that the sensor of the M11 versus the Q3, despite the specs on paper, it's almost identical. But you can't be the same sensor when one is more towards red.
That's true. I guess like that's also matching with the feedback that we get on the Q3. That the Q3 color seems to be a little bit different from the M11.
Yeah.
So it's good to see that we can confirm that at least. From
even when we standardize the magenta in the Lightroom, if you look at both images, you could still see obvious color difference.
Yeah, I mean, even looking at as you said, the difference between these two pictures zoomed out is very clear, right?
So we are focusing on infinity here, so obviously we can't talk about the depth of field, but let's talk about the field of view in this photo.
Yeah.
So I mean, I could see Q3 is slightly wider than the M11 as well.
Yeah, exactly. So I mean, the Q3 is advertised as a 28 millimeters.
Yep.
Obviously, from this picture, the 28 millimeters on the M11 seems to be a bit more narrower than the Q3.
I mean, you could see an extra, exactly that area, and that was cut off in the M11. Now we shot both cameras on the tripod.
Yep.
So we standardized the view. It wasn't handheld. So I mean, you could appreciate the field of it is just slightly wider. Close to 26, 27 millimeter when you compare to the M11.
Yeah. So I guess we can move on to the next one.
Let's put you in it.
Yeah.
So tell us what we done with this photo. So what's the distance?
So in here we have 2 meters.
Yep.
Basically, I'm actually 2 meters away from the camera.
Yep.
You can see I'm doing the sign for basically identifying this picture as 1.7.
Yep.
So again, on left hand side we have the Q3, right hand side the M11.
Yep.
So
and we standardized. We got rid of the magenta on the M11 for time's sake.
Yeah.
And maybe we can bounce up the exposure a bit more so that both of your white shirt looks about the same. So a bit more slightly. Yep, around that. Yep. And without zooming in, like, what do you think about the color?
Yeah, I mean, for me, it's still it's a bit warmer, I would say. Looking at the clouds, for example, you can tell there's a bit of a warmth there compared to the Q3.
Why don't we get rid of the warmth as well, just for experimentation?
So by the way, also the white balance was fixed as well on both cameras. So that's why it's interesting to see there's still a shift in terms of the warmth.
We set it to 5,000 K.
Yeah.
Okay, so now you change the white balance on the M11 to 4,600.
Yeah.
Which almost look like it has just a bit more blue to it.
Yeah, at least the clouds a bit more similar.
Yeah.
But clearly you can still see there's still a difference in the colors. I mean, look at this area in particular, right? So the green doesn't look exactly the same.
Yeah.
So it's clearly like a small difference that we see in terms of colors that's happening as well.
I think one of the most obvious thing we could see on the M11 or the 28 Summilux on the M11 is the vignetting.
Yeah.
And why don't we try and get rid of that and then see whether we could match it to Q3. Yep, about that. So I mean, you just remove the vignette and still you could appreciate. I think that the M11, the 28 Summilux on the M11 looks different, and I don't want to use the word cinematic because we used it last time and people were questioning us about what does it mean. But you could see how, let's say, if you look at the clouds, like over here, you know, obviously this is a few tones or few shades darker than here, isn't it?
Yeah.
And we look at the shadows in the darker regions on the side of the picture. It looks like on the M11 combination, it's just richer or darker or more intense in terms of darker tones.
I really feel like on the M11 is the contrast is, I would say, if I had to kind of have the Q3 mimicking the M11, I would bump up the contrast and try to mimic that. So that's why I feel on the M11 out of the box, the contrast is slightly higher than the Q3.
But if you look at the highlights, like the shirt, they are both about the same.
Yeah.
So you're not blowing the highlights on the M11.
Correct.
It's just that the darker areas are slightly more darker.
Yeah. So I guess we can also zoom in to my face. apologies, we couldn't get a better model for this. But let's try to match. Sorry. It's more or less.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's actually quite interesting. Still, after the adjustments that we did on M11, you can still see the shift in color, right? So
Yeah.
I guess like in terms of sharpness, I think both, I would say,
Yeah.
at center is actually the sharpness is pretty close to each other, right?
And this is 2 meters, so I mean the previous comparisons show that at infinity, Q3 is definitely better or sharper at infinity. But when we position you at 2 meters, I think it's comparable. I mean you can't really say which is sharper, which isn't.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's definitely very comparable. I think we can also check the.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think this is. Right.
Okay, so what this is an example of something else, isn't it?
Yes, it is.
What is it? What are we looking at here?
I would say this is the color fringe that we are seeing here on the M11.
Yeah.
It's more noticeable. This green kind of change on the border side that on Q3 is less noticeable.
Yeah.
It's still there, I would say, it's slightly, but on the M11 is more prominent.
So that's the chromatic aberration. It's more pronounced on the M glass.
Yeah.
Can we try and get rid of or we'll tune it down in terms of color, the chromatic aberration tool?
Let's see.
So I mean purple fringing is easy to get rid of, but the thing about green is it's slightly difficult. Do we have really high at the chromatic aberration page?
Lens correction.
Yes. No. How about
Yeah,
menu?
it's already.
Oh, already they have on.
Yeah.
That's on profile. But let's go to the menu.
Sure.
And then just try and can we shift the green away? Doesn't work. It's just difficult. Green,
I think the green is quite hard.
Yeah. Okay, so let's just ignore that.
But it's interesting. They do have a profile loaded for the corrections, and that's technically applied already.
Yeah. But
still.
Yeah, you can still see it. Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, the other thing that this example shows is the depth of field, isn't it? If you look at the back, the details on the Q3 seems to be more pronounced. Like this is at the background.
Yeah.
So this bag is behind you. So it's more than 2 meters. So it's not in focus, and it seems that the Q3 depth of field is wider than the than the Summilux M on the M11.
Yeah, for sure. I think like even looking at the umbrella, you can see that on the M11 it's almost like just almost disappearing.
Yeah.
While the Q3 is still very well defined.
And when we shot these two cameras at 1.7.
Yes.
So technically at 1.7 depth of field should be the same, but on the image, the M11 is just, it doesn't look like it is at 1.7 when you compare it to the Q.
Yeah, I think even looking at here.
Yeah, if you look at the details of the fence, I mean that's a really good example.
Right. Yeah, so, I mean, on Q3 you can clearly see like
the
very clear line, right?
The columns.
But in the M11, it's getting very hard to see that. Yeah.
We can look at the bokeh towards the light side. Yeah. Exactly. The colorful area at the roof.
Yeah.
So I think it's this one. You zoom in here. Yeah. Yeah, I mean that you could see that the Q3 is just slightly more well defined, whereas from the Summilux M on the M11 is just more melted away.
Yeah, you can see even this the part of the structure, right? It's almost it's almost like disappearing.
Yeah,
here, right? It's just a thin line actually. Well, in the Q3 it's definitely.
And again on this zoom in, you could see on the M11 the green fringing is more pronounced as well, the light source.
Yeah.
But it's interesting if you compare the noise that we can see when we zoom into 300%, it's almost the same, isn't it?
Yeah.
So I mean, both sensors in terms of ISO sensitivity, I think it's on par at ISO 200.
Yeah.
It's a 300% zoom, so you do expect to see some sort of noise.
Yeah, I think it, and I mean, in terms of distortion, I would say they actually behave the same, right?
Yeah.
There's no clear like distortion that's happening that's different from each other. So I think that's one good thing. I think we can go to the 2 meters maybe. Sorry, 1 meter.
Show them the 1.4.
Oh, 1.4.
The
okay.
M11. So we shot the Summilux 28 Summilux on the M11 at 1.4 and 1.7. So obviously the Q3 can't go to 1.4. So we did a 1.4 versus 1.4, and now we're going to show you the 1.7 versus 1.7, and now we're going to show 1.7 on the Q3 and 1.4 on the M11.
Yeah.
So supposedly 1.4 means the depth of field is even more shallow, although of course we shouldn't really do this, but you know, when we buy the Summilux M for the M11, most of the time we are shooting at 1.4 anyways. So we'll be interested to see how different the image look and whether it is worth the difference, because the lens of the Summilux M is also quite expensive by its own.
Yeah, I guess like at 1.4 you can clearly see, you know, the background is further melted, right? It's very creamy,
just blown away. I mean, if you look at the yellow structure just behind the shoulder, I mean, you couldn't see lines anymore.
I wouldn't know what this is actually. yeah, exactly.
On the M11, but at least on the Q3 you could still see the structure is more like a pyramid.
Yeah.
Let's look at the light side. The buildings at the back. Yeah, the windows.
Yeah, so I guess these are just...
It's just gone.
Not even buildings anymore.
Yeah, so I mean, if you like, you know, shadow depth of field, you like the creamy bokeh from the Leica profile, the genetic blueprint, then, you know, obviously the 1.4 Summilux M gives you that additional kick. For obviously additional price.
Yeah, but I guess even I mean, looking at this, the ICC, which is this building here, right? It's I mean, very famous in Hong Kong, but it's just it's gone. Right? So.
Yeah, but and then at the same time, though, you can see that the green fringing is more pronounced, and it's sort of blurry as well, isn't it? It's not like sharp and well defined line. Now it's just like someone slapped some green paint over.
Yeah.
The bokeh balls is slightly rounder or bigger, I guess.
Yeah,
it's difficult.
To the 1.7.
Yeah. But I mean, that's what you pay for. 1.4 Summilux, half a stop faster than the Q3.
Yeah. Okay, so shall we go for 1 meter?
So the next set of comparison, we move you closer to the camera at 1 meter, and. Okay, so we need to adjust the M11, get rid of the magenta, and then bring up the exposure slightly, and also the white balance. We try to, I think it was like 4600 in the last one. Yep, about right. Yep. Okay. So what are we looking at here?
I guess it's again, just to reiterate a little bit on the sharpness, both, again, apologies, it's very zoomed in, but prove the point that...
make that zoomed in. Yeah, there you can see the cracks on
look
his
at my
lips.
mustache.
Yeah,
I didn't shave for a while, so yeah.
Detail test,
just for this video.
Yeah.
So yeah, both of them are really sharp in the center. I honestly could not tell, like just by the sharpness, the difference between them, to be honest. If this was a blind test, I couldn't tell the difference.
Yep.
Color, again, yes, there's still a difference.
Yep.
But yeah, other than that, I wouldn't be able to distinguish them at center.
Yeah. And then we can back out slightly. I mean, if you look at the shirt, the crease folding marks on the shirt looks pretty well defined on both lenses.
Yeah, it was very hard for me to make the t-shirt like this, by the way, for this video. I mean, it took me a lot of time, so
it's just for this test.
Yeah, just create the texture, right? So otherwise it's very hard.
But I mean, okay, so although they look well defined in both lenses, I would say that the M11, the Summilux M on the M11 has darker shades in its I think just look a bit more 3D pop, if you know what I mean. Like the shadows behind the crease.
Yeah, I would say that the highlight part and the shadow has like a big
Yeah.
Like I wouldn't say gap, but it's just like they're just
spectrum is wider.
Yeah, I would say it's wider in a way that makes it contrasty.
Yeah.
Again, I think it's the contrast on the M11 that is very noticeable, right?
Yeah.
Creating this difference in terms of the highlights and the shadows.
I think the shirt is a really nice example to illustrate the way that the M11 and the Summilux M sensor work. I mean, we look at the Q3, it's it's there, but then you see the M11, you just feel like the crease is even more, pronounced. And it's the same shirt, we didn't do anything, and we swapped the camera quickly, so we didn't temper the t-shirt in any way.
Yeah. And I think the other thing to highlight is that we, unfortunately, as you can tell from the weather, we couldn't really test for flares.
Yeah,
right.
It was almost raining.
Yeah, actually we did catch rain in the end.
Yeah.
But so I think this is something that we could possibly test when we get a sunny day here in Hong Kong.
Yeah.
But for now, that's something that to be still.
Yeah. Supposedly these two lenses are flare resistant.
Right.
Because they're rather new, but it will be interesting to see how they react if we remove the hoods and also get rid of the lens filter just to test it out. But I mean, if you zoom in, both of them at around 200% zoom, I would say the sharpness was almost the same.
Yeah.
But you just feel like the M11 has more pop.
Yeah, I feel like the crease is actually coming out like more.
Yeah,
it's like
it's more
it's
pop.
almost like a 3D effect in a way. Yeah. Okay. And I think we can go to the last one just to show basically some vegetation, how that's performing. So Q3 on the left
So now we're looking at the color green. So we have to again fix the M11. So we bring the magenta down. We drag the white balance to 4600. Yep, and we raise the exposure slightly, having that one knocked down. Yep, and we look at the dustbin as a reference, so roughly the same exposure. Again, you could still see the various differences we talked about. So the field of view on the Q3 is wider. The vignetting is more obvious on the M11.
Yeah,
the shades are darker. But let's zoom in at the tree at the back.
Yeah, I would say even without zooming in, like you can see the tree itself has some 3D effect. I would say a bit more because the shadows are just
the shadow is more obvious.
Darker. Yeah. So as we zoom in, so let's take this as a reference here.
Look at the gap in there. And so for you audiences, both cameras are shot at 1.7 again. The aperture is the same 1.7, ISO 200, and we standardize the white balance, and still we have to adjust the white balance on the M11 sensor.
Yeah.
So what we look at now we zoom into this gap, maybe enlarge the tree slightly on the M11. Yep. Yeah, okay. So obviously you can see the images are different. The Q3 seems to be sharper at the leaves. The edges is just more defined, and this is something to do with as we talked about, just when you focus infinity, Q3 is better.
I didn't expect to be such a difference actually, to be honest, especially based on our understanding of both what Q3 has and the Summilux 28 for M. Yeah, it's quite impressive, I'd say, like what they have achieved with Q3.
Yeah.
The sharpness, I mean, to be honest, even being a first-time user of Leica Q, the Q3, the sharpness was something that kind of popped straight away. Yeah. After my first picture, it was very obvious that the sharpness was very, very much better than something I used before.
And this is a 300% crop. I think credits to the M11, the Summilux M and the M11. That's what you expect from most lenses at 300% crop. So I would say the Q3 is actually doing way better than what average lenses could do. But I mean, the other thing about this particular window you're showing us is how on the Q3 you have some of the white speckles. Yeah. And on the M11 you can't really see it. Both ISO were 200 and every settings were standardized as much as we could. But then on the M11 side, it's just this whole seems to be, I don't know,
deeper.
Deeper, isn't it? Yeah. Although it's the image is not sharp, it's blurry in a sense, but it just looks deeper.
Yes.
And I think that just goes back to how the Summilux M and the M11 package interprets shades.
Yeah, I think
shadows.
It's a very interesting finding, actually. This is like a pattern that we see across.
Yeah.
I mean, obviously we only pick a couple just for this video, but this recurs like across all the different pictures that we kind of took.
What about the color green? Because green is an important color to do well in. So if we just look at the highlights of the tree and not look at the shadow.
Yeah, I would say like even like without zooming too much.
Yeah. So now you're around 66% zooming, get in closer or too much. Back out slightly. Yep, around that. So now we're around 66% zoom. I think the Q3 is more yellow.
Yeah.
Whereas the M11 it's more green.
Green. Yeah, I would say it's more minty. Like it's definitely something that it's very interesting because we did adjust the white balance. I mean, to further match by making it cooler. Colder in a way. It still makes it the Q3 is warmer than the M11.
I mean, the M11 looks like it's in spring, right? The deep, rich green, and the Q3 looks like it's autumn.
Yeah.
And it's not something to do with the yellow because if you look at the sign at the bottom, they both yellow are rather similar.
Very similar,
right?
Yeah.
So it must be the green and how both sensors interpret, or the sensor and the lens combination interprets the color differently.
Yeah.
And I mean, now you're just showing another great example of the sharpness of Q3. You could see the Chinese words on the sign right there. Yeah, and then if you look at M11, it's just blurred.
Yeah, and I mean the chairs, for example, it's very clear.
Yeah,
like, the edges of the chairs, while here it's hard to figure out. It's definitely an interesting finding.
Both at 1.7, ladies and gentlemen.
Yeah, and that's why I got a Q3.
Yeah, that's why I got an M11 and the Summilux M. All right, so what can you summarize just by using this relatively brief example?
I mean, I would say basically Q3 at infinity sharpness definitely much better than the M11 with the 28mm Summilux.
Yeah,
and obviously we do see the M11 sensor behaving a little bit different in terms of color, right?
Yeah,
so
way different.
Yeah.
I mean, it's on paper you couldn't tell, right? Yeah. Both are 60 megapixels, BSI, CMOS sensor.
Yeah.
But you know, when you look at the raw files, there's just a few more things you need to do on the M11 to bring it to the color of Q3.
Yeah, and I think the other thing is that people might comment like, oh, you did shoot at a different shutter speed, right? But actually, we also wanted to test in terms of how the camera is actually behaving for exposure. Right? So we tried to basically expose, obviously, like as close as possible. Basically, have the same exposure meter, and they were still exposing differently. So that's also something that we noticed differently in terms of the sensor. That was one of the findings that we wanted to find out as well.
We use center weighted for this, right?
For both of them.
For both, and the shutter speed varies. I mean, for this current example you see on the Q3 is 1/320, and then on the M11 was 350, but we have to also then add some exposure back to the M11. So I mean, I would say both cameras are just completely different, and with the lens you just get a different rendering of color. And you know, if you use Q3 for, as you said, for far things like landscape, you know, that's great for prints. And this is at 1.7. When you focus something far, you probably stop down to 5.6.
For sure. Yeah. I mean, the sharpness just literally goes even better as you stop down.
We didn't do a 5.6 test on both cameras because it was just getting darker and the rain was coming. But at 1.7, I think Q3 wins in terms of just infinity focus and sharpness, and just so modern as well and clean. But I think people buy M11 and the Summilux M for the character that Leica gives you, which is, you know, sadly absent in Q3 in a way. Like if you look at a Q3 image, you couldn't see it is in the same genetic profile as what you expect from the traditional Leica look.
Right.
Yeah. And but I mean, when you bring the subject within 2 meters or 1 meter, the sharpness is similar.
I wouldn't be able to distinguish between them.
So if you're using this for close-ups or just within 1 to 2 meters, you can't see the difference of both. So which one do you like more in terms of these two? After looking this brief example.
I mean, maybe I'm biased because I have a Q3. But honestly speaking, I really like the Q3 rendering. I honestly don't use the M, and for me, I really like the M depth of field, like as in like the depth that you get in the picture. So as we talk about, the shadows are just darker. The highlights are more vibrant in a way, like brighter, but not too like blown out as well. So I feel that creates, I would say, texture in the picture, if that makes sense. While the Q3 is maybe flatter. I mean, lack of better words. But in that comparison, that's how I feel like. I still prefer the Q3 just because, again, the sharpness that it gets, especially for infinity, for street, it's fabulous, right? I think as you shoot like in Hong Kong with all the buildings, I think that just shooting across the street is something that you're gonna really have the sharpness across the entire street, and that's definitely noticeable on the Q3.
I mean, it depends on what you do. I think you do prints, so having sharpness it's something that is very useful, especially if you convert to black and white, because you just want to see those textures, right? But if you just look at if you look at the screen, you could see, the M11 is just, as you say, more organic, more pop, and I really don't want to use the cinematic word anymore, because we got tons of comments about it, but it looks like you're watching a Netflix movie sort of way, how they try to replicate that sort of dark, low-key sort of motion picture. So and this is right off the bat, we didn't do a lot of editing on the M11.
For sure not. These are also the raw files as well.
Exactly. So I mean, it would be, you could arguably produce something similar on the Q3 by pushing the curves
I think
a bit more.
Actually, we don't have an example right now of the black and white high contrast that Q3. Actually, I do shoot in that mode quite often, just because it gives that kind of texture, like which I would actually equate almost as close as the M11, because the contrast becomes so clear and the shadows become so dark, and the highlights just behaves the same way as the M11, close enough that I actually enjoy shooting a lot in that profile in the Q3.
So I think it depends what you guys want. If you want to do prints, want sharpness, obviously Q3. And now we're not talking about the autofocus on the video features, but just image in terms of just comparison of the image you get of it. Q3 is the one to go for. But if you just want the artistic side, the pop, without doing too much, then the M11 Summilux package seems to be winning in that area as well. So and I think next up we have a set versus the film. the Summilux M on the M7 with Kodak Gold. So stay with us and we'll bring out the film images out again.
Sure.
We are back, and we are now comparing, just a refresher if in case you've fallen asleep, we are comparing a Q3 at 1.7 ISO 200 versus an M7 with the 28 Summilux M, also at 1.7, and we use the Kodak Gold 200, so the ISO is the same. Obviously the film colors will be different, but the whole point of this exercise is trying to isolate the properties of the 28 Summilux M lens without the M11 sensor. So by projecting onto film, we're trying to look for the features. We talk about this lens, how is it different from the Q3, and hopefully the film will give us a bit more evidence of what we are saying. So right off, again, in focus at infinity.
So let's check these two structures again. For the film, we won't zoom in too much because obviously the resolution is not going to be the same.
It's developed by a third-party shop, so the scanning process could be improved, I would say. But
yeah,
I mean, you're not using film for resolution anyways. Yep.
Yeah, so I think it's clear as well that sharpness on the Q3 it's definitely higher. I mean, again, the resolution of part. I mean, it's can't really.
Yeah, but let's look at the colors. Like,
yeah.
We talked about how the M11, obviously Summilux M has darker shades, and it seems like the film is brighter in a way. But if you zoom out a bit, although the center is quite bright, but if you look at the corners, you see the pattern of vignetting.
Yeah,
yep.
The vignetting is still very present.
And within the if you look at the clouds, why don't we try and overexpose the Q3 to try and match the the M7. Yep. Yep. Okay. Yep. So I think the skies are way blown out, but still you could see things that are in the shade, like the shadows all over the high-rise building. It's just so much darker.
Yeah, I would say that like the right-hand side is very obvious, right?
Yeah.
It seems like it's just like cover in the shadow, right?
Yeah.
So and to be honest, on this day everything was very cloudy, so the cast should be the same.
Yeah, the even.
Yeah, it's very evenly spread. So
that's the effect of the lens.
Yeah.
Okay, so next one.
So let's move to...
We'll speed things up slightly.
Yeah. So this one is 7. Sorry.
I need to get the 2 meter one. Yep. And trying to overexpose the Q3 to match the film. Roughly. Yeah. So we're not color correcting the film, obviously, because Kodak Gold has this sort of a warmer tone. But now that we have blown out the highlights, what do you think about the things we talk about, the differences that we saw in the M11, the M11 combination now on M7?
Yeah, I think like honestly, it's still repeating. It's pretty much the same in terms of like the sharpness at the center. The color change, obviously Kodak Gold impacts that. But I would say it's still the same behavior of the shadow. It's just more contrasty. If you look at the t-shirt, right? Again, just using the t-shirt as a reference.
Crease,
it's like this was just roll over for like I don't know how many days, while this one is like probably like
you've been ironed. Right? Someone run an iron over your shirt slightly.
Yeah, exactly. So I think the details on this one, just because of the contrast, is so different. I think it creates that.
I mean, if you look at the shadow on your chin, you could just see this sort of black outline underneath, whereas on the Q3 it's not as pronounced. And this is on film, by the way. It's not high resolution. So
so I think it's definitely kind of matching with our previous review with the M11.
Could you see now both images here are shot at 1.7, but let's look at the depth of field. We said that the M11 Summilux M combination seems to have a thinner depth of field, right? The bokeh seems to be more dissolving. Could you see the same thing now that we swapped the camera to M7?
Yeah, I guess if anything, it makes it even more in a way, just because you can't really tell where the lines are anymore.
I think is it the same sort of image?
Yeah, I'm just using the size.
Okay, we see that the barbell shaped bokeh in there. Yeah, I mean, yes, resolution on film is not as good as 60 megapixels, but still, if you zoom out slightly, at this view, you could definitely argue that the M7 Summilux combination seems to have a bit more bokeh. Depth of field seems to be more like you don't feel like that's a 1.7.
Yeah, it definitely doesn't feel like. I mean, knowing that the left side is 1.7, the right side definitely doesn't seem to be.
Things are just so dissolved and melted. And so now you're showing us the bag. And
the bag has no lines.
The patterns is just gone.
You really can't tell what this bag actually has any patterns.
If you look at the shaft of the handle of the umbrella, you know, this one almost as if it's, you know, melted wax.
Yeah.
It's like gone, combined with film.
Yeah, I mean, obviously on film, the resolution is much lower, right?
Yeah.
And
melts everything.
Yeah, this is not something like a high res that we had.
Yeah. It was a high res scan. Yeah.
So yeah, obviously take that with a pinch of salt, but still it kind of matches with the pattern that we previously saw with digital, right? So
for sure.
Yeah. So lastly, let's look at
the tree shot.
The tree shot. Yeah. Okay.
And now we're looking at the color green. Could you see that? Yeah, can you get into the hole? Again, this is 1.7 focus at infinity. Wow, that's interesting. We talked about the white dots in this hole, right? How the Q3 seems to have a bit more when you compare to the M11. Now on film, it seems like it's the same problem. You only get a few white specks on the M7 plus the Summilux M, and I don't know, the hole just looks deeper, more 3D, because you look at the corners, how the shadows just merge into light, whereas this is just, you know, one dark black circle in the middle.
Yeah, I think the left side again is, we can't really tell how deep it is in a way. On the right side, we can tell it's deep. It's like there's some depth to it.
That's the power of M.
Yeah, I think that's
that's the power of paying so much for use money to get that.
Definitely a difference in terms of that.
And the tree just looks more poppy, right? You just see this runoff. It's more organic, it's more pop, whereas the Q3 just looks flat in a way, despite it's sharper. So it's interesting that you could have a sharper image, but it would still look two-dimensional.
Yeah.
Whereas you look at the Summilux M on whether film or the M11, although it's not as sharp, but somehow it's just the way that the colors are represented.
It gives it a bit more texture to the picture.
Yeah, you just feel like it's sticking out in your face a bit more, despite it's not cutting into your retina in terms of the shape of the leaf.
Yeah, it's very interesting actually.
And that's on film, guys. Film. Yeah.
So just looking back again, the vignetting aspect to it, the dark side. Actually, the left hand side, this is very clear actually. It's just much darker. It's like this part. The shadows are just much darker.
It's just so difficult to describe it to people without showing them the image. Like, how would you convey this with words? It's just much easier to show you the image, and then you could see what the magic is about.
Yeah, I guess, like, again, knowing that the Q3 and the M11 have the same sensor, I mean, we expected to have that baseline, but now with the M7, obviously, it's just pure lens comparison here, right?
Yeah.
And we can clearly tell there's a distinction between them. Yeah. Even though we are told they're exactly the same. Yeah. I mean, maybe like I would say 90% is the same, but there's clear differences, right? That we can see. It's just obvious to us as we take. There is some difference.
Zoom out just the camera, switch it. Okay, so I mean, today we compared not a lot of image, but we used 3 different combinations, and I think by just looking at, we try to standardize it as much as we could, technically speaking, using tripods and the similar settings on the cameras. And we distill to several recurring themes, right? Q3 is just sharper all the way. Yeah. But you know, the M11 or the 28 Summilux M more specifically has its strength as well. It's just more pop, and it really depends on what you're looking for. Obviously, if you ignore the price behind them. So after comparing digital versus digital and then digital versus film, which camera would you like?
I mean, it's obviously, like, for me, I jumped into Q as the first camera for Leica because I do feel
Canon.
I mean, it's convenient, right? It's like a point and shoot, and I was actually very surprised with the sharpness. I wasn't expecting such a difference. I mean, when we compared with the M11, I was like, maybe we missed focus, but it's actually not possible because both focus at infinity, right?
Yeah.
So we know it's basically the difference of the M11 and the Q3.
Yeah.
And for me, I honestly prefer the Q3 just because, again, the sharpness, and obviously because I can use autofocus, which I cannot do in M11 or in the M cameras. I just can't use rangefinders, but I do appreciate the M popping out, right? So I think that there is definitely a texture difference. Like if you imagine like a picture being three-dimensional, I think the M would have like much more depth in the picture texture, if that makes sense. And I think that's very, very obvious looking at the pictures. While the Q3, you probably have to edit a little bit much on the contrast to make that level of contrast. But yeah, again, I would still, like, I'm very happy with the Q3, and I think it performed better than I expected.
I mean, for me, I share your passion about Q3. That's why I have one and you have one right here, you know. But I mean, for M's, you know, we do know it's expensive and it doesn't have all the function that Q3 has. So depends how you would use it. If you don't need the autofocus, or you just want that Leica magic, the Q3 is going to disappoint you in the area that you don't see that organic pop that you would get. And I think that the M glass in general offers that special character that I think other lenses by other companies couldn't even get close to replicating. It's just something to do with the shades of the darkness, that, and the depth of field is something that was surprising, because I knew about the shades. I knew that the Leica M, because I've been shooting Leica M's for a while, I could see how it's just much darker, more organic. But now that we compare with a Leica Q, we could see that even the depth of field, the apparent depth of field, although both were 1.7, but somehow just the Summilux M, even on film, it demonstrated it's just more melty. It doesn't feel like 1.7 if you compare it to Q. So I think that's the main difference. And if you're looking for that sort of thing, then the M is just the way to go. You can't avoid it, and you can't find something like that from other brands.
I think that's exactly to the point. And I think even though, like, for M you might have the color fringe that happens with the 28, but I think for M you have the versatility of using different lenses.
Exactly.
So I think that is obviously the plus side compared to Q, right? As well, is that on M you just have a wide range of selection that you can pick from. And then that can cater to the different experience that you're trying to take, or the different shoots that you're trying to take. While Q, again, for me, I see it as a street photography. I'm very happy with it.
It's a great camera.
It's a great camera. But I do see definitely a difference between the M and the Q line.
Just have it all. Have it all.
I mean, if you can, if you're into M, sure, get the M. I personally, I just can't get into M yet. He's trying to convince me. But I just can't. I'm just happy with the Q3, but I do appreciate the M line.
I mean, for me, 28 Summilux M, I could put it on M11, M9, and M7. So it's not fixed to a single camera. But I do own a Q3, so I find them both very useful and unique, and depends on what I need to do.
I think they would complement each other, to be honest, right? I mean, it's the area of, like, the Q3 is strong, M11.
It was actually going. It was raining that day after we done it. So
I was still shooting with the Q3.
I was busy hiding my M11 and the Summilux from the rain, and this guy was shooting, because of the weather sealing. I was enjoying it a lot, actually. And it just depends on the situation. But I mean, let us know what you think about your preference. That there's no right or wrong. Just depends on what is your style of shooting, what you look for, and hopefully throughout this video we could address some of the similarities and differences. And I hope we can convince you what we have talked about previously using this video.
I guess I mean, this is also, just to add on, this is like the first time we're doing this kind of comparison. If you guys watched until this point and you like this kind of format, do let us know, because we're happy to do it more. But it's obviously lengthy, but we want to be as detailed as possible. So I think that's ultimately what we're trying to do.
So what would you like to talk about next in terms of Q3?
I think for me, Q3 is exploring the low light performance. I really want to understand how it performs at night. It's a BSI sensor. We know for a fact low light performance is going to be great, but how great is that? I want to find out. So
I'll push the ISO to the max.
I'm going to see where it breaks, basically.
And even when broken, you could fix it with Lightroom AI denoise.
The denoise.
He's going to try to denoise and try to push the boundary of the ISO for you.
See what we get, actually.
What is actually usable with the AI function.
Exactly.
Okay. So I think for me, one of the things I've just found out recently is the wireless charging. And so, you know, if you are looking for a Q3 or you have got a Q3 but waiting for your wireless kit, you know, watch out for the next video, because we're just gonna give you a little, I don't know, how should we say it? We're gonna expose something that, you know, maybe the marketing team didn't really sell it to us, right?
Yeah, I would say it's something about the wireless, like when you see it,
don't ruin it.
Yeah,
but, you know, watch out for the video.
Yeah, watch the next video.
We'll put it in the box somewhere.
It's unexpected, I would say. Yeah. I was surprised.
Yeah. Okay, so at the beginning we told you guys we have a gold nugget, so you stay with us until the end. So here it is. What is our gold nugget?
Well, basically we are having another Q3, so we have two. And there's actually another one coming end of this month.
Yeah.
So if you do want to get a Q3, I mean, subscribe to our channel, stay tuned to our announcement video that is coming out hopefully end of this month.
Yeah.
And then we can actually select someone that will then get that. We'll ship internationally, and it will be our first time as well, right?
Yeah.
But I think because of the feedback that we got from our viewers, I think
they've been asking us where we get this, and you know, we don't have one, we have two.
And it's and it's really hard for us to tell you guys where exactly to get it, because this actually, they do not come exactly from the same source.
Yeah.
It's
more
hard.
the same time.
Yeah, nor the same time, right? So it's very hard for us to say, oh, go here, and then most likely there's no stock there, right? So so we try to get one extra, so that's, you know, if you guys subscribe, stay tuned for the next video, and then we'll.
It's not free. It's not free. You have to pay for it, but
it's definitely.
I don't think we're going to charge too much for it. It's going to be something comparable.
Plays the market, right?
Yeah, I think our goal is just to, you know, want to get a Q3 so that we can, you know, share with someone who is living somewhere in the world who just couldn't get access to. Maybe Leica isn't, you know, doing much in your area, so we have one. And hit like and subscribe, and hopefully it'll be ready by the end of this month in June, and then we'll pick one guy out of the comment section. So make sure you do drop a comment if you're interested in buying a Q3 from us, and we'll just ship it to you when we get it.
I think it's a great opportunity to actually get a hold of one.
And you can definitely get the warranty from Leica, 1 year, I think, right? You can buy one more year. So, you know, don't worry about the warranty issues. The stock will definitely, the camera that we're selling will allow you to get the 1 year additional warranty in wherever you are in the world. Just apply directly with Leica.
So I think that's, I mean, we tried very hard, to be honest, to get this.
It's not easy.
As you guys know, it's not easy, right?
Not easy,
so it's a lot of research and finding the right people.
Put a lot of strings to do it. So like and comment if you're interested.